This is Toledo's Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, our music director, Alain Trudel, principal second violin, and artistic administrator, Merwin Siu, and a special return guest, that is Effie Papanikolau, who is a musicologist on faculty at Bowling Green State University and an occasional panelist here on Toledo's Symphony Lab. Welcome back, Effie.
Thank you, Brad.
This is your third appearance, I believe?
It is my third.
Yeah, we talked about the Schumanns and Johannes Brahms, and we also talked about Mahler and his Resurrection Symphony, which almost closed out, pretty much was the last big concert of the TSO's 75th anniversary season. So we had Mahler's Resurrection, and now we're on to Mahler's 5th, which begins with a funeral march. Kind of interesting that you had the Resurrection and then the funeral. But we're going to talk about Mahler and the program. It is that time of year when the season opener is upon us. That's happening this weekend. It's happening September 27th and 28th, Friday and Saturday, 8 o'clock p.m. at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. Alain Trudel conducting the concert. We're going to hear music of Alain Trudel, also Korngold's Violin Concerto, and Mahler's Symphony No. 5. So we have a big Mahler discussion on tap. However, I want to start with you, Alain. We're going to hear a piece that you wrote for orchestra. Many folks know you as a conductor and also as a trombone soloist, but you are also a composer. You've written a number of works, both chamber works and orchestral works. And we're going to begin the concert this weekend with one of your orchestral works. It's called Rhea, inspired by the mother of Zeus, right? The Greek goddess. Yeah. You seem to take on these heady subjects. I have another sample of your music here called Big Bang. Oh. I assume has, space cosmological associations. We can listen to a little bit of it here. Let me play just a little bit so we get an idea of what your music sounds like. That's music of Alain Trudel from a piece called Big Bang. Alain Trudel, conductor of the Toledo Symphony, is conducting his own music for the season opener happening this weekend. A piece called Rhea. This is the American premiere.
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
Yeah, give us a little background on this piece.
Well, what I thought was interesting. Well, first of all, it's nothing to compare with the rest of the program. Of course, the other works are works of genius. But I thought it'd be nice to start with something very positive, a lot of energy. And this was commissioned by the other TSO, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah.
And it was... you know that the Rhea is also called Sibel, like the decibel, Sibel.
Okay.
And I wanted to have a theme that had something, first of all, talked about a very important woman, and that also had a musical already kind of background to the not the story, but the person. So it is said that whenever Rhea would come and would walk in somewhere, there would always be fanfares and drums, and So I thought, what a great way to start the year. So
I have the same experience.
What's your walk-in music?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I also thought of doing specialized music. So there's some brass that are in the hall, so people will hear. It's like a kind of a THX at the movies. The sound comes from everywhere. So there's a fanfare that comes from there. There's of course big part for the percussion and the trumpets, but it's for full orchestra. It's very short. It's an orchestra fanfare. Maybe it's 6 minutes. it's built around this one note that expands to a full fanfare after that.
Well, here's the way you should do it. You should have the orchestra start it on their own, and then you walk in as the trumpets and drums are playing, right? You get the season off to a rousing start. Well, that's exciting. In some ways, it speaks to sort of the person that all roads lead to in this concert, and that's not necessarily Gustav Mahler, but Alma Mahler, because you've also got the Korngold Violin Concerto on this program, which was dedicated to Alma Mahler. Korngold was, mentored by Gustav when he was young. And you have a violin soloist that is Liza Furchman. Is it Liza or Lisa?
Liza Furchman. And
she's a Dutch violinist,
yes.
Right? Now, tell us a little bit about her.
Well, it was one of the things that sometimes when you're looking to perform a piece, you just listen to a whole bunch of recordings. And I think sometimes people think that's how we choose all of our soloists. We just kind of listen to recordings and find the one that we like the best. But in this case, that's exactly what happened. She's a woman who's got an amazing career in Europe and has performed with the Concertgebouw Orchestra, the Berlin Symphony, Vienna, but has not performed as much in North America. So we're really excited to, bring her to American audiences. It's not her American debut by any stretch, but she has more of a European career. And I think what we really liked about her Korngold Concerto is it's very spacious, expansive, but powerful. There's real muscularity behind this. And it's funny because Korngold talked about the concerto kind of combining aspects of Caruso and Paganini, like this, you need this kind of heroic tenor quality to it. And she really brings that. And so we're really excited to feature her.
Well, it's also just a great setup for what's to come because, I was joking about ending with the resurrection and beginning with the funeral this season, but the Mahler Symphony No. 5 kind of stands alone in some ways from his other symphonies. And as far as in-house live and concert experiences go, this is really like, the Mount Everest of symphonies to experience in person. There's so much in the way of just thrilling moments in this symphony. Zach, you look like you're poised to say something.
I'm pretty sure you described the resurrection the same way on the podcast we did for that. So I think what you're trying to say is whenever we perform Mahler, it should be experienced live, and I would not disagree with you on that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're done with the resurrection. We're on to the funeral now. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 5. We're also going to talk about Alma Mahler because there are about 5 or 6 romance novels there, I think, in her life that we want to talk about, and her influence on many composers, including Korngold and that violin concerto. But Effie, you've been sitting there quietly. I'm going to bring you in now. We have a segment now which is designed just for you. It's called Ask the Expert. Let me pull up your theme music here.
This is my expert theme music.
Yes.
Okay.
Hang on. It's just an introduction, that's all. I won't play it while you're talking. So
Mahler appreciates it.
Yes. Which Mahler?
Alma.
Okay.
Always.
Now, my question to you is, we're playing Symphony No. 5, right? We're talking Symphony No. 5, Gustav Mahler. Put it in context for us. Give us a little history on the symphony.
So the year is 1901 in Vienna, and Gustav Mahler has already been with the Vienna Court Opera and the Philharmonic for about 4 years. He got the job in 1897. He has already written 4 symphonies, which have yet to be performed in Vienna because the Viennese audience could not stomach his music. And talking about stomach, in March of 1901, he nearly died of an intestinal hemorrhage.
That's a fantastic segue, I have to say.
I didn't even plan it. It just came naturally right now. So he's in very bad physical shape. He had a surgery. It almost killed him. And he decided that he couldn't really stomach anymore working for the Vienna Philharmonic because more than the opera, he really hated working with the orchestra. So when he came back from the hospital, he gave his resignation and he was free of those duties.
Yeah.
And then it was summer, and usually in the summers he would spend his time in his villa in a little chalet on the lake, and he would dedicate his entire summer just to composition because he was so busy throughout the year conducting, he didn't have any time to write any music.
Yeah.
So summer of 1901, he goes to his chalet, he has quiet time, his sister is there, one of his dear friends is there, other people visit, but he always has his little hut, his little place where he composes quietly. And according to the sources, that's when he started writing the third movement. He started the Fifth Symphony with the scherzo. And after that, he went back to Vienna. A new season at the opera was starting, and he started, probably from what we understand, he continued to compose the Fifth Symphony, although that was very unusual for him to have all these duties and continue to compose.
Yeah.
And then the Big Bang happened. Sorry, Alan. But for him, the Big Bang was November of 1901.
This is when he met Alma, right?
That's when he met Alma at a friend's dinner. And he met Alma, and initially he didn't think too much of her, but then they got into an argument, which was typical of Alma. Here she is, 22 years old, and she's hobnobbing with all the elite of Vienna, and of course she was part of the elite. And here she is in front of one of the greatest personalities in Vienna, Gustav Mahler, the director of the Vienna Opera, and she gets into an argument why Zemlinsky's music was not played by the Philharmonic the previous year.
We should mention she had a special relationship with Zemlinsky at the time.
Very special, Brad. Extremely special. And Mahler got very upset. He said, I don't think it's really great music. She got even more upset, and that led to a second meeting. And at the second meeting, he was convinced that she was the woman for him.
I mean, it's no wonder that the story of Gustav and Alma has inspired, movies and books and all different kinds of treatments of that relationship. Now, I asked everybody to send me their favorite moments of the symphony, and Effie, you chose an excerpt from the Adagietto. I'd like to listen to that. Do you want to set it up for us?
Yes, it's a moment in this gorgeous movement, which, of course, we will discuss again, I'm sure, where the violins play this quotation from Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. And here it comes.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a subtle reference in some ways. Yeah.
It's a subtle reference, but everybody who wanted to reference love, reference Tristan, and someone like Alma, who was very well educated in music, would have gotten the message.
Yeah. What was the message? Because we all know how that story ended.
Before the end, though.
Because this is still early days.
We're still early.
So it's the idea of love that can't be destroyed by mortal means.
Well, or love that is so passionate, it almost feels, and it may be, unrequited.
Yeah.
And apparently he wrote this Adagietto after he met her, although we're not exactly sure about that.
Yeah. Well, everybody says it's his love letter to Alma Mahler. I mean, now I'm a little unclear on all of this, on the chronology. I mean, when did they get together?
They got together immediately. In December of 1901, they got engaged secretly, and then they were out in the open, and then within 3 months, they got married, and she was actually pregnant with their first child when they got married.
Well, eventually the marriage soured, as we know, but where does the Symphony No. 5 fit into Gustav's relationship with Alma?
So the following year, in 1902, now newly married and with Alma pregnant, they're back at his chalet, at his villa, and he continues to compose, and he finished the symphony. And the next year, in 1903, when it went through various revisions again and again, because we talked about that before, how Mahler continued to revise his music, then in October of 1903, he sent it out for publication, and there was a dedication on the first page, which you can see on the manuscript, to my dear Almshi, the faithful and brave companion on all my journeys.
Wow, nice.
But the word faithful, I think, was
Maybe optimistic.
That was another subtle message he was sending.
Yeah.
I think we just need to point out, for those who don't know, that Alma was herself a wonderful composer, and during their courtship and marriage, Mahler made it very clear that he wanted his wife to be wife, mother, housekeeper, not composer.
Well, until he sensed that she was, moving away from him.
Right.
Then he changed his tune.
Right. So in moving away from him, she starts having affairs with some rather elite figures.
Yeah.
And that's where the great heartbreak comes.
And Mahler, as we know, then at that time became an advocate for her music, helped to get some of her songs published, and supported her in that way, but eventually to no avail. I want to move on to somebody else's favorite here, and Zach, since you were at the microphone just now, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the selection that you chose?
Yeah, so this is, I think, from the maybe the first third of the first movement. And I'll say that the first movement really confounds me because there's so much going on. I think it's there's a huge amount of themes and a lot of exhilarating passages to come through, but there are also some amazing climaxes. I mean, he really uses all of his color and capability in creating drama in the first movement. And the drama, I think, is finally resolved in that beautiful Adagietto that we just spoke of. But for me, the first two movements are really anxious or even filled with agony. And this quote I have here, I find very interesting from a historical perspective, because if you go back just a couple years, we're living very much in the world of Brahms and Tchaikovsky. I mean, Brahms at this point has only been dead for 4 years when he's writing the fifth, when Mahler's writing his fifth. Tchaikovsky's last symphony was just a couple years old at this point, less than 10 years old. So if we think about what drama meant for Brahms or for Tchaikovsky, and then we hear this really crazy, dramatic moment from the first movement, you start to realize where Mahler has already taken music. So when you think about this symphony really laying the path for what the 20th century music will become, this little passage of 15 seconds is, for me, I think, very revealing. And one of the reasons it always sticks out for me is that he's doing so many different things. The trumpets are hitting one set of rhythms. The timpani are punctuating all sorts of different rhythms.
Yeah. And Elaine is doing air French horn over there.
But it's just incredible to hear the amount of depth in this orchestral moment, in that you have the winds are flying. They're a little hard to hear. You have to listen very carefully to hear what the heck the winds are doing, because there's so much other stuff going on.
Yeah.
But it's this crazy, crazy canvas, and I feel like this is the dawn of the 20th century right here.
Oh, there's that trumpet again. That trumpet that opens the whole symphony. Interesting.
I like how you described, Zach, that moment, and I have a quotation here, if I may read it. This is a letter that Gustav sent to Alma in 1904 after the premiere of the symphony. Alma couldn't attend for some reason, so he wrote from Cologne, where the premiere was, and he said this: "Heavens, what is the public to make of this chaos in which new worlds are forever being engendered, only to crumble into ruin the next moment? What are they to say to this primeval music, this foaming, roaring, raging sea of sound, to these dancing stars, to these breathtaking, iridescent and flashing breakers?"
Yeah.
He was very shy about describing his music.
What was it? Was foaming, raging? I mean, there's great adjectives there.
Yeah.
Foaming,
Primeval's a good one.
roaring, raging sea of sound.
That's exactly
he knew
what that is.
exactly that it was so beyond anything that anybody had ever heard.
Yeah. Merwin, you chose another excerpt from
I
the
think I
Adagietto.
chose almost
the same.
Well, I was actually thinking that maybe this. Do you have the Scherzo excerpt or no?
No, I don't think
Okay.
I have the Scherzo.
It's unfortunate because the Scherzo excerpt is actually the perfect complement to this.
Yeah.
Because it's very funny that I think we were talking about this a little bit off air. I think when you're performing the symphony, it's an entirely different experience. Like I think maybe more so than any of his other symphonies, there's a real internal logic to it. So it may seem so, like raging and primeval. I chose an excerpt from the Scherzo, which to me it's just Mahler's chamber music, incredibly simple. And to me, this is what I think of when I think of this symphony, is just how like gorgeous chamber music it is. It's just such a, but I think to go to the Adagietto excerpt, I think a lot of times when you present kind of a main melody, then you develop it and change it. When you return back to that melody, it feels more vulnerable, more naked, and more, kind of more poignant. And that's what I chose, is the return of the main melody of the Adagietto.
I'll just say that I think if you were a brass player, you would be thinking something else, right?
I'm not so sure. I actually think that it's all Mahler is difficult and pushes the brass players for sure. But I think that this is something that it feels very right in a way that I think the Third Symphony, which is actually my favorite symphony, pushes you so far beyond the bounds of what's right. Whereas the Fifth, to me, feels much more proportionate.
Yeah.
I would say that a brass player would still appreciate the radiance of the Adagietto. I mean, it will go down and has already gone down as one of the most beautiful expressions in all of the repertoire. I often say things like, this is the most beautiful slow movement ever, but this is probably the most beautiful slow movement ever, and at least if it's not the most beautiful, it's in the top 5.
I'm not trying to set up a turf war here. I was just thinking. Actually, I was thinking of when we had Megan Schuster on your principal horn a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about how thrilled she was for those brass licks. And there's a lot of stuff that happens for the horn throughout. Alain, you're a brass player.
Yes.
You side with the brass, or?
Well, what's really I'm in agreement totally with Merwin about this. That Mahler has the most. The biggest brass moments, the biggest orchestra moments, and then chamber music. And it goes with his personality. The opening of the symphony, ta-da-ga-da, ta-da-ga-da.
Yeah.
It's actually a sign of his rhythm. Like he told Bruno Walter, exactly.
There we go.
Okay, so this is written not like we play it. We have to play a certain rhythm that's a Mahler rhythm in this. And, you don't have to play all of it. Okay, fine.
It's hard to stop it once it gets going.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is that Mahler had this funny way of walking. He had a kind of jinx, and he would say click, click, click. Each third step, he stepped a little bit on the side. And the way to play this is music. And of course, Mahler is somebody who writes to the conductor in his score. Like he has a message for you if you're conducting his music.
Because he was a conductor.
He's a conductor, but a complete control freak. He writes complete text of how you have to do each rhythm. And this rhythm rhythm is very special, and you'll hear it in the concert hall how it's done, because I learned it from. It's a long lineage. Music is an oral tradition, right? So Mahler told Bruno Walter how to do it, who went to conduct it in New York, who told Vacchiano was the principal trumpet there, who told De Vorst, who I know, and he told me what Mahler had told the guy who told the guy. So
wow, you're sort of like the great-great-grandson.
No.
That's
but
fascinating.
It is fascinating because the rhythms and the way to play Mahler and the different interpretations of it, there's not so many different interpretations you can do, even if a lot of people do different things. If you play what's in the score is difficult enough, there's a lot of stop and go. You see the personality. You can see how stormy it would be to be involved with that person, because it's very good. So stop and go. It's like the loud, soft. And in the music, it's like that. All the different parts have that kind of music in it. And over the years, it's like in the 70s, 80s, it was played kind of as a big wash of sound. But if you play exactly what's in the music, you can see how incredibly the language is not modern because it's romantic, the harmony and all that, but the way to write it and the way to play each of the different parts, you can see why the second Viennese school, like Schoenberg, was like said, "Oh, Mahler is a god for us," right? Yeah. And he supported those people. He understood where they were going. So it's a gateway to the new music.
I want to just briefly talk about what listeners can bring with them to the concert hall and what they can expect, and what's the best way just to experience Mahler live in the concert hall. Does anybody want to jump in and talk about that?
If I may.
Go ahead.
Okay, for this symphony, that every symphony is its own universe, right? This symphony, you really have to, first of all, the first movement, there are two things you have to remember. The ta-da-ga-dam, and the da-da-da, and those two things, they go together. And just let yourself go. It's kind of shortish for a Mahler symphony because the first and the second movement are like brother and sister. They're in the same family. So just think those two go together, and then when you pass this experience, you will be completely tired after that because oh my God, emotionally it takes so much. There's so much drama. Then we go into just a scherzo, which is just fun music, a little dance, and then from the scherzo. Which and just take for what it is, and there's this big horn obbligato. You don't really know why it's there. Just enjoy it, and then it's actually the real repose, and this is at the beginning of that third movement, which the drama comes again. But then we get to the fourth movement. For me, it's a moment of calm in this big symphony, and the fourth and the fifth are like another piece. So 1, 2 are together. 3 is just a fun piece. And 4 and 5, the Adagietto that people know, that's the piece that people are going to know the most. So I would say go and listen to that first. Now, you have to listen at home a little bit if you can, or just on your computer, but go and listen to the Adagietto. And then there's a little lead in. When you hear the horn at the end of that piece, there's going, bam, there's an A. Then you're in for the last leg of the symphony.
Okay, well, we're going to continue our discussion now with the podcast extended version of our program today, talking about Gustav Mahler and his Symphony No. 5. I have a few more selections here. Merwin, I didn't play yours just because we listened to part of the Adagietto already, but I want to hear one of the choices that you have, Alain. This comes from, we've been talking about that trumpet lick that opens the whole thing, and it returns later in the first movement.
Yes, it does. It's interesting because when you played sax selection, it's basically the same as I had in the first movement. So, but what would be interesting, if possible, is to go to the excerpt from the second movement because it shows the cyclic music of Mahler because it's basically almost the same, but it goes somewhere else. Okay,
well, let's listen to that then. I started all these a little bit early so we can get into it.
You hear it comes back.
There's something about this movement that always makes me think of like a sea shanty or like a there's
I was just
swashbuckling
thinking,
about it.
It has a little bit of a corn gold feel to it. Yeah. All those Errol Flynn movies, right?
Yeah. And what about the Beethoven fifth quote? And that's like
Sure.
all the way ta 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 ta.
It's a little also like a reference to the crumbling Austro-Hungarian Empire at the
Absolutely.
time.
Oh, that's another podcast.
Countess and-
How much time do we have?
So this is like a waltz deconstructed.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like
Yeah.
a tango.
You could put in the Ravel.
You could do La Valse, yeah. That's later in the year.
Make
That's in
a
April.
whole nother program around that. Viennese decadence.
But you think about it. So, I mean, the Beethoven 5 illusion is probably worth talking about just a little bit because in the opening motif, it's 3 shorts and a long.
Yeah.
So,
What is that in Morse code? Do we know?
but you think about, okay, so Trudel, you opened up your first season with Beethoven 5. You now are opening your second season with Mahler 5. So, in a way, it's interesting because these two pieces are kind of inexorably linked.
And I think extremely analogous. I think that if you have Beethoven Fifth as kind of a structural framework, you're not going to be all that far off listening to Mahler's Fifth.
True.
I think you get that same journey from minor to major, and that same sense of this pushing against hostile fate.
Yeah.
And then, kind of moving
Tragedy
into,
to triumph,
Exactly. So I think that's something that, symphony goers who are trying to feel like, what would it have been like to hear Mahler's Fifth? Think about being at Beethoven's day and listening to Beethoven's Fifth. I think it would be reasonably similar.
Well, he cemented that template, really, Beethoven,
Yeah.
of Tragedy to Triumph, which is taken up by so many different composers, but taken to a completely new level by Mahler. Effie and Elaine, you've been trading notes back there while Merwin was talking. You have something you want to...
No, it's that little rhythm we were talking about before. But what's really interesting is that in the fifth, there's a, how could you say? Do you say courtship? He's trying
A courtship,
to...
yeah.
Yeah, with Alma. And then the sixth symphony comes and there's the Alma's theme in that first movement. But that symphony doesn't go to major. At the end, it goes to more drum and faith with the hammer of,
Yeah.
faith. And so it's really interesting. And
The big hammer, which folks can find YouTube clips galore if they go online.
I built my own.
You did?
Yeah, from a
You
tree.
built your own hammer.
Back in the...
From a tree?
Yeah, from a tree trunk from the house back from my place. And when we performed it, there's
Mahler
cowbells.
tree.
I went around the different farms where I used to live and
You
got
collected
cowbells.
cowbells?
Yeah, I collected cowbells because they're not supposed to be musical cowbells. They're supposed to be from the countryside. Anyway, so
We know Mahler always needs more cowbell. Right?
Bravo. No, bravo.
But you mentioned Alma, and we've talked about Alma. She's sort of been, hovering over this entire discussion. And I want to talk a little bit about Alma Mahler. Effie, you mentioned that she had this relationship with Zemlinsky, and then she met Mahler, and they had the tumultuous relationship, but then she also started an affair while she was married to Mahler. And, looking at it on the surface, she sort of had a pattern in her love life, as it were, but she also had such a huge influence on many, many different people. She came from an artistic family. Her dad was, a painter, right, I believe?
He was a painter, yes.
Yeah, and she moved in those circles throughout her life, lived another 50, however many years after Mahler died. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Alma Mahler and give us sort of your perspective on her.
Yeah, so the facts are what you said, essentially. She was someone who came from the upper crust of the Viennese society, so she had access to all the artists and great salons of the time, and they loved her because she was extremely well educated for the time for a female. But also she was a very smart, intelligent person and a great musician. As Zach said before, she was a composer. She studied with Zemlinsky, and Zemlinsky was also the teacher of Schoenberg. Zemlinsky was not taking on any student just for fun. So it seemed that, there was a lot more there, and of course it developed into a romantic relationship. But
with Alma, not with Schoenberg.
No,
right?
with Alma. Yes,
Yes.
let's specify that. Let's clarify that.
Yeah.
And then when she and Mahler met, apparently, according to the latest biographer of Alma's, she was still in an affair with Zemlinsky.
Yeah.
And she broke the news to Zemlinsky that actually they were not going to be together anymore, only after Mahler and she got engaged secretly.
Wow.
Now that's counterpoint for you.
Yeah. She was hedging her bets there.
So when they got married, immediately within the first year, she got very disillusioned. And there are many reasons for that. Some of them are very obvious, and we have evidence of that. Gustav wanted her to be the mother, the protector, the person who was going to answer to every one of his demands.
The copyist.
The copyist of his music.
Wow. That's like the worst
Yeah.
of the worst. For her to be a composer and then have her composing husband.
And not be allowed to
yeah.
compose anymore, to express her own voice, and live in the same household with somebody who was composing music. But at the same time, it never seemed that she was so much into his music. She was always critical of certain parts of his music, including the end of the Fifth Symphony. She didn't like the end with the chorale.
Yeah. But imagine if somebody puts shackles on you and say you can't do this.
Absolutely.
He said there's one genius in this family, and
Right.
it's me. It's like, whoa.
Right.
And of course she's going to go bitter, and she's going to be critical. And also she was more romantic than him in her music also. More in the
Right.
straight tradition of that. He's more revolutionary in the kind of writing. But that's there's a case there, because if you read the book like The Art of Being Loved, Alma Mahler, The Art of Being Loved, you kind of you read it's a little bit too late almost, so you have you can pass a judgment on Alma Mahler, but you have to think she's like 18 years younger than him.
19, yes.
Yeah, and she, and she gets together with this guy who's iconic. At the same time, he comes from this really dysfunctional family with not much culture, so he has his own complex of inferiority because she's actually comes from exactly like you said,
upper crust. Yeah.
But he has more years, and he has the career, and she has. It's very complicated. It's something they both should have never done.
And that's exactly what Gustav said to her. He said, when she started complaining, you knew that from the beginning. You knew whom you were marrying. So you can't complain right now that because he was overbearing. He was extremely demanding. And she was someone who wanted constant attention. And that was not Gustav Mahler. He was not willing to give her any attention more than what he might have wanted.
A big difference between 20 and 40.
A huge difference. And he was always a nervous
I don't remember
wreck.
either.
For different reasons.
But he was always a nervous wreck. He was also constantly, he was saying, you never know when they're going to fire me from the opera, because there was such an anti-Semitic climate against him. So he was always in this precarious situation. And at the same time, he wanted to make music. That was the only thing that he wanted, to write music and make music. So it was as if, I agree with you, Alain, they never should have gotten together. Those were two people who were not simpatico by any means.
I know, but would we not have the Adagietto if it were not for Alma then?
And probably a lot of other music
that
he openly wrote under her influence.
The little bit overcompensating Eighth Symphony when he was trying to get her back. Let's put 1,000 people on stage and say, I love you. It's too late. No, it's sad. Because by that time, for her, it's too late.
Yeah.
It is too late.
No, the forest is burned. I mean, there's no trees left. It's and
they've all been turned into hammers at that point.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's actually very sad.
Yeah.
And of course, then you have the death of their oldest daughter in 1907, and that truly breaks up their relationship forever. He tries to get her back again. There's this famous story where he consults Freud, and the two of them also should never have met because they were at completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how they felt about life and how they thought about life.
Yeah.
Alma started having relationships. She was a 20-something-year-old woman, very excited about life, quite flirtatious, according to the sources. So she had an affair with Walter Gropius. And Walter Gropius was not just anybody. He was the most famous architect of the time. He was the creator of the Bauhaus school. So he was another amazing lover, another amazing partner in her life.
And she married him.
And after Gustav Mahler died in 1911, she married him.
And then Kokoschka.
And then let's just go down the rabbit hole
forgetting,
here.
we're forgetting all the great violin concerti that came out of this with the corngold, and then the Berg violin concerto would never have happened without
the
daughter.
Can we touch a little bit on the violin concerto?
Yeah, definitely.
If it's okay. And it's not about the violin concerto; it's about the composer. Is that there's a lineage, of a European, Western music, European composer. Then you have Mahler. Then of course you have Strauss, which is contemporary of Mahler. Then you go further, and there's kind of it stops. And you were talking about antisemite. That's one of the big reasons that everybody moved out, right? Because they were fearing for their lives. And one of probably the next Strauss or the next great composer would have been Korngold. Why he was Korngold, but then you move out. Then what are you going to do? You have to earn a living. You have to make.
Went for the. Yeah.
Well, you migrate and you have to find a way to make your art. And he found it in the cinema, and he came to America. And it's an amazing composer. But imagine if you go back and you just tell him you can just write concert music, then we would have had another repertoire. Because the violin concerto is as good as any major works of any composer, from the time before that. But it's really interesting to see all you're talking about. Maybe we wouldn't have had that music if Mahler wouldn't have gotten with Alma Schindler. And yes, but the events and life events and history, they carve the music that we play. They carve the music that is there. I mean, and very often they're very, very bad events. But the as human beings, they want to survive.
Yeah.
And it's just a way to survive. And it's for them, Gustav Mahler and Alma, it's a way to survive each on their side for a little while. For him to try to get her back, for other composers to try to survive after a war. That there's all this backdrop, and we hear music, but there's always something that's really more human behind it.
Yeah. So what else would not have existed if Alma Mahler was not not here? If we do like alternate history, right? There goes the Berg Concerto. There goes the Korngold Concerto. Although
I think that needs to be a drunk history program.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'll say so. She emigrated to the States in the 40s. She became a U.S. citizen, and she lived in New York. So you think about what was happening in the late 50s and 60s with Bernstein leading this kind of Mahler rediscovery.
Yeah.
She was attendant at many of those rehearsals with the New York Philharmonic.
Yeah.
So, she even influenced the rebirth, with air quotes, of Mahler's music later in her life.
Well, and I mean, I guess it's fairly safe to say that without Alma, much of Gustav's work would not have been propagated in the way that it was, with her as an inspiration. So that, like a house of cards, then it sort of falls down. Bernstein without Mahler, all these other conductors and musicians without the influence of Gustav Mahler. So she's sort of the linchpin of musical history in regards to Gustav Mahler and all the, reverberations of his art.
You think about the sense of the muse, though. This is what originally brought Effie into the studio last season, talking about Schumann and Brahms and Clara Schumann.
Yeah, except that one had
a little more positive than this one.
Right.
Yeah, but we might be over dramatic in this, but I mean, here's a singular woman who affected music history and perhaps architectural history and literary history as well.
Yeah, because we didn't mention that actually when she divorced Walter Gropius, she got together with Franz Werfel, one
Great
of
poet.
the great literary figures
Yeah.
of the time, and it
So
was
she got
with
a-
him that she emigrated to the United States.
So the Alma scorecard, 2 composers and 1 architect and 1 poet. Was there anybody after that?
Well, there were some flirtatious connections in between.
Now we're getting to the good part of the podcast.
Kokoschka is very dirty
Yeah.
for me. So.
Well, but
You know, speaking of
sorry, I can't stop laughing
oh,
about that.
sorry.
But,
That's okay.
If I could just say that, I mean, the Werfel, that probably was her most successful relationship. I mean, they were married for 15 or 20 years, and I think he had fathered a child that she had when she was still married to Gropius, right? There's something in
That sounds familiar.
yeah,
You mean,
Werfel.
okay, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scandal. This is like, you know,
You
TMZ
need like
goes
a
classical.
bunch of yarn and push pins and a whiteboard to figure all this out, right? To
You
tie
mean
all the
after Manon
connections.
Gropius, after she died?
uh,
Okay,
We'll figure it out
check
later.
We'll
her
come back to
biography.
This is what Wikipedia is for.
That's right.
Elaine, you want to?
yeah, just to come back to the topic of music. There's a
That's no fun.
now music and history is that one of the reasons that there was a rebirth of Mahler or birth of Mahler actually is music later on, is that the anti-Semite and the Nazi were so. They wanted to get rid of anything that had to do with anything that's Jewish, anything that's Mahler also, that Alma was able to buy all the rights to all the music of her husband for about the price of a grocery. Once at the grocery, like was, I think 250 billion, but you know the money kept going up before the
That's
the
a
big
lot
crash.
of groceries.
No,
really.
no, but like seriously,
Grocery
like 2 loaves of bread or something like that for the entire catalog in the 20s.
Yeah.
And that gave her liberty to have his music performed. And at that time, when we think of a muse, somebody who's a muse, it's kind of the connotation is kind of negative sometimes when we think of it. But if you go back to that time, it's not exactly what we think. It's somebody exactly like Alma that has great taste, that's actually a little bit above, that you want to impress the not only because you want her to like you, but also because you know how much knowledge there is there and how much experience within the arts.
Muse is actually my favorite word in the English language, and I think it's one of the things that's so funny when you think about that role. Is it's often thought of as a very passive role, like you inspire, but you basically the composer's doing the work. But I think that Elaine's talking about, there's a real practicality to it, that to be an inspiration, it's not just it's not just a passive verb, it's an active verb. And I think that there's
Exactly.
Musing.
and I think the combination of like that element and then the ruminative feel of the word, I just love that word so much.
Yeah. The opposite of amuse, right?
Well, sometimes this podcast combines both, or B-muse.
The best of 3 worlds. We're going to wrap it up momentarily, but you want to weigh in with anything else?
I just want to add that Alma was an incredible woman, but she was also a piece of work.
Yeah.
And if you read her latest biography, which is actually called The Benevolent Muse, you find out some tidbits about her life that you're not going to like so much. She also expressed a lot of anti-Semitism in her life.
Really?
And she did many things that we would say are unsavory or in bad taste now. And I'm not going to go into more details.
I mean, that's a story that has repeated itself several times in the history of classical music, and certainly with many composers that a lot of people know and love, and they also have their dark side.
Right.
And the question is, do we take it all, or do we reject it? So.
And in her case, we still have her music too.
Yeah.
And I always encourage my students, go and find her leader and perform her leader. She was a very good composer.
I want to give the last word to Gustav Mahler and just finish out with an excerpt from the finale, actually taking it all the way to the end. But I do want to mention, for those of you listening to the podcast version of our episode today, The entire episode inspired by the opening of the 76th anniversary season of the Toledo Symphony Orchestra. That concert is happening this weekend, Friday and Saturday at 8 p.m. at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. Elaine Trudell at the podium, violinist Lisa Fetchman. We're going to hear Trudell's own piece, Rhea, a big fanfare opening up the concert in the season. That'll be followed by the violin concerto of Erich Wolfgang Korngold, and then finally Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 5, which we've been talking all about today. You can get more information at ToledoSymphony.com or 419-246-8000. This program is a production of WGTE Public Media and is generously underwritten by the Rita Barber Kern Foundation in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab. You can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including both Apple and Google Podcasts. And don't forget, you can check out all the upcoming events at the Symphony in their new season. Visit their website at ToledoSymphony.com and their various social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My thanks to Zach Vassar, Elaine Trudell, Merwin Sue, and our special guest, Effie Papanikolau. I'm Brad Cresswell. You're listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91. And we'll turn it over now to the finale of Mahler's Symphony No. 5. Anybody want to talk about it a little bit, or we just want to let it play out?
I'll just say, given all of the agony and anguish that we've been talking about, this symphony ends with one of the sunniest finales. So, take it away.